our entire way of life. When someone wants us to get out of the way on the road, they give us a blast we can hear a mile away. The individual no longer needs these faculties. He does not need them for his survival. He does not have to scent game. He does not have to scent danger. And with the way his smog is now, his senses wouldn't last long anyway. But in any case, he certainly, in those days, had the clearest and most complete possession of his faculties. He lived simply. He ate simply. His foods were not denatured. His life was not filled with unnecessary artificial tensions that close in our modern man. He could contemplate. His mind was not disturbed by the confusions that we know. And while he had his problems and his troubles, most certainly, he lived a simpler way of life. And with this simpler way, he was close to nature. And his intuitions, his inspirations, and his revelations had an authenticity which we cannot deny. For we know that all forms of knowledge that we boast today originated in times when the powers and faculties of man must have supplied him with the total instrument with which he worked. He had to be able to produce these things out of himself. And because of that, we marvel at algebra, we marvel at geometry, and all of these forms of learning, but they came from the past, from long ago. Man has improved upon it. But in the dawn of time stand the shadowy figures of the originators. And these figures, some way, stand head and shoulders above those who have made new and useful applications of these first great dynamic thoughts. And in this group of dynamics belongs our problem of astronomy. Now, in astronomy in those days, we involved another term, which perhaps has fallen likewise into evil times, and that is the term astrology. It is unlikely that, with the exception of navigation and the calendar, that ancient man studied astronomy from any great and profound interest merely in the heavens and their motions. His interest was in meaning, not in motion. He was searching the heavens for truths, not facts. He was looking for dynamics. And always his problem was to apply his knowledge to the immediate problem of his own existence. And out of these long observations, which perhaps gradually evolved his concept of the seasons, came the calendar, a method of determining the periodic return of seasons, the eccentricities of the calendar, and many interesting details. The Egyptians, for example, had a calendar which corresponded with a circle. 360 days in the year, 360 degrees in the circle. But they gradually came to discover that this was not quite right. They found their year getting badly out of order. So they created 5 intercalendary days. And they set these days aside and apart. And to these days they assigned the birthdays of the 5 principal gods. Interesting also to bear in mind that the Chinese and the old Egyptians and the very early Greeks did not have a septenary system of planets as later came into existence, but as the Chinese called them, the 5 emperors, the 5 great sidereal emperors. For the Egyptians and the Chinese were well aware of the fact that the sun and the moon were not planets. Medieval man did not know this, however, and constantly combined the planets and the luminaries to form his septenary. But the older people, like the Egyptians, decided that these 5 days should be the birthdays of the planets, and they set them aside. We are working now with a calendar reform project, and the only way we can make it work today is by the introduction of intercalendary days. So that now the thought is that we shall no longer have a 365-day calendar with leap years and other inconveniences, with the days of the week falling on different numerical days of the month and so on, but that we shall go back to the old idea of having 360 days, 360 degrees, and set aside the 5 days, not this time as birthdays of the gods, but now as our 5 world holidays, which would not be counted. They would be the intercalendary days. In this way we could simplify many contrivances and problems, but would make life very difficult for astrologers, who would have the problem of trying to determine this equation in correcting charts. Down in Central America, where the Sun-Venus calendar was represented on the scales of the great dragon, which the feathered serpent of their philosophy, it is said that the great deity of the Kichi Maya complex, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, that this deity gave them the calendar, the Tanlamatl, the book of the sacred days. And by this calendar, which was ornamented with the symbols and devices of the gods, the world and time both were divided into epochs, eras, and compartments and separate units, and to each was assigned a deity. These people went so far as to assign a divinity to each hour of the day and night, anticipating the medieval astrologers' planetary hour system. All through the ancient world, the calendars and the gods went together. One of the first uses of the calendar probably was to determine religious feasts.